Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's N3C Community Forum. I'm Rebecca Baker, working here at NCATS with the director, Joni Rutter, and it is my pleasure to kick off the meeting. Next slide, please. You'll hear from a few members of the NCATS N3C team today. First, Dr. Joni Rutter will give a leadership welcome and overview. Then Dr. Mike Kurilla and I will give some information and updates about engagement and governance activities on the platform. And then lastly, you'll hear from Nathan and Luca from the Axle Informatics technical team about new directions and plans for operations and research in N3C. So with that, I will turn it over to Joni.
All right. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I really appreciate that. And it's so nice to see you all on the call today. Thank you so much for joining. We can go to the next slide. And the last time we met, we were in a precarious situation because at that time, it was in January. And during the forum call that we had then, we were kind of in the midst of facing another shutdown. And so we were a little bit uncertain about what that was going to look like. And however, it was fairly straightforward. We did have a shutdown, but it didn't last nearly as long as the previous one. And on the flip side of that time, NIH received its budget, and at that point in time, NCATS was lucky enough to receive a slight increase in our budget for 2026. And our total budget is $942 million. And most of the NIH didn't receive an increase. In fact, they were flat. But within our increase, we had a $4 million increase to the National Clinical Cohort Collaborative. We also had a $14 million increase for studying rare diseases. And those two things do have an intersection, but this $4 million increase is just a real, very firm, very strong signal that Congress is supportive of what we've been doing in terms of the N3C platform. And so I want to tell you a little bit more about how we're evolving that going forward. I think in addition to the increase to N3C, there have been other changes that have been made that haven't really affected the overall sort of idea of what N3C is, but we've been able to take advantage of additional sort of economies of scale, if you will, that are expected through collaborations with other HHS and NIH agencies in partnership of building N3C as really part of a real-world data platform and a real-world data network. And so we've been thinking about this and starting to build this out a little bit more. And on the next slide, we have sort of the idea that the mission of the real-world data platform is essentially to build a robust and secure national infrastructure to integrate and link data from a variety of real-world data sources, largely through the NIH, but also across HHS as well. And this is going to be in line with the deep respect for individual privacy rights that we have had from day one, since we've started to build the COVID platform and now into the real-world data platform. And so we want to make sure that there will be deep and advanced computational analyses, resources for investigators for a wide-ranging areas of research activities, including neurodevelopmental disorders and chronic diseases that are huge priorities for NIH. And what I wanted to really point out in building the real-world data platform here at the NIH is that N3C and data counts are really the bones of what this is going to be looking like. And so I want to just pause here because you hear a lot about N3C, but we're also partnering with data counts. And the person who runs that program is Susan Gregorick, and she's been able to join the call today and hopefully able to join many other calls. But I wanted to give her just a moment to introduce herself and say a little bit more about data counts and the integration with the real-world data network.
Hi, thanks so much, Joni, and thank you for inviting me. I certainly hope that I can enjoy to join future meetings because it's so important that we work together. And as Joni said, there's real interest from our congressional colleagues in the Real World Data Network that we are putting together. And this is a significant component of that, the N3C, with all the partnerships with you and with data counts. If you haven't heard about this before, and this is somewhat new, this is an initiative to collect data from healthcare encounters, real world data from healthcare encounters at the point of entry into our electronic healthcare systems, by also keeping track of the provenance and the lineage of that data, and looking at this in terms of a scaling opportunity. This is to collect data for chronic disease and neurodevelopmental disorders and other efforts. So we'll be working with you and the CTSAs and others as we roll out these programs and scale them across the country. Thanks again, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I'll turn it back over to you, Joni, and happy to answer your questions.
Well, thank you, Susan. I have to say, Susan's such a wonderful partner in this space. We've been working together for many years at the NIH. So this has been a long time coming, and I'm really excited about the prospects of what we can do for science going forward with this sort of platform that we're building together. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Just to continue, the idea here is to think about the real world data platform, but largely more even as a network. So we're not going to build everything overnight, but we want to start thinking about how we can include not just the data sources from the CTSA program, the CTR program, and OCHIN, and what we've had as partnerships before, but we want to include CMS and the claims data and billing data, pharmacy chains, environmental data, sensors, etc. And so all of these things we are looking to make sure that we can build a program and a platform and a network that is flexible enough to accommodate these sorts of activities as we grow and build. And the opportunities, I know I don't really have to tell this group, but the opportunities are quite vast in terms of real-time health monitoring, thinking about drug development, looking at longitudinal data sets, outcome-specific research, regulatory approvals, and other kinds of approaches that we can use to leverage these data, and even thinking ultimately about how we can use these for developing clinical decision support, testing those kinds of ideas, and those sorts of things. So there's a wide range of activities that we can start to include as we start to build this out. Again, those are we're playing the long view as I'm talking about this, but we're starting to build this so that we can actually reach those capabilities ultimately. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Where are we? And this is sort of in the past, we have built N3C to be a COVID specific repository, and that enclave has been restored into N3C, but now we're looking to move beyond that. We will be using similar analytical tools that are available for continued research. And we also recently stood up a new aspect of our governance structure, which is a Strategic Partners Committee, SPC for short. We met for the first time in March, and it is a collection of just a dozen or so individuals across the CTSA program and our contributing partners that will be meeting on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, to discuss sort of ideas of, where are the pain points? How can we think about general directions for what N3C needs to be as we're thinking about it for its connection to the real world data network. So that's, I think, a key component of the governance structure that we're starting to build now. So now in the transition phase, we're kind of thinking about what is that next phase and building a bridge for it. And again, one of the key things that we're doing with N3C now is to have it access all clinical data and do research on all clinical data. We're developing a governance and review process that is starting with our strategic partners, but also a few areas of our other governance structure that I'll talk about in a minute, and we'll talk about more a little bit over time in this presentation. But the governance structure, I think, is extraordinarily important for just ensuring that we have a variety areas that we're looking at more specifically, a little bit more scrutiny from the groups who are really involved in N3C from the community. And I think that's a very important process. In addition, we're also sort of doing an architectural decoupling. What our experience was when N3C went down over that 5-month period, that was sort of an unexpected dark moment of N3C, if you will. What we want to do now is think about how we can future-proof the environment and reduce our reliance on any one particular contractor or vendor, but really thinking about that as more of a way where we can be agile and flexible to the needs of what N3C is and to the needs of the community. And so that's another aspect that we're building in going forward. And then you hear a lot too, I'm sure that when we've discussed this before, that looking ahead, we're really anticipating building dynamic workspaces, and these will be sort of program-specific workspaces in hopes that we can really make sure that we have a very clear privacy and security posture that we've always had, but we want to make sure that that is maintained with the broader ways of accessing data. We're also piloting data sharing models and trying to really build out that scalable infrastructure to support the broader research that I've been talking about. And I also wanted to say at this moment in time that we have, because we had this experience of going down for 5 months, I wanted to warn you that we do know about this one. This one is a planned scheduled maintenance for May 22nd through 26th. And so this is really just about a scheduled maintenance activity that we need to do. And so people will not be able to access N3C during this time. So I wanted to give you a heads up about that particular date since it's coming up. But other than that, things are continuing to move apace and things are looking good. I think we can go to the next slide. That might be my last slide, and I think I'll turn it over. Oh, I do have one last slide. On our community forum last time, people were asking sort of who really works within N3C. We want to give you a deeper dive into this, but we also wanted to answer the question for this meeting. And so this is just a current snapshot, and this will grow over time, and we want to actually make a nicer image of pictures and people and sort of more specifically what they do. But on the NCATS side, of course, I'm as the NCATS director, I have oversight of the program. But we also have a very strong team here. Mike Kurilla is the program lead and the systems owner of N3C. Andy Kelly is our point person for all things N3C. Rebecca Baker is our engagement lead, and she'll be talking a little bit later as with Mike Kurilla. And then Chris Dillon has a hugely important role in developing our data transfer agreements, our data use agreements, and our data access request agreements, and works with our Office of General Counsel and works with all the institutions when it comes to those agreements. So that's the core group on the NCAT side. There's actually a broader team, but that's the core group on the NCAT side. In terms of governance, I mentioned that we have a Strategic Partners Committee, that's the SPC, largely made up of data contributors. We have a Data Access Committee, which is largely federal staff from the NIH, and we're going to add others across HHS, largely from CMS. We have a community forum, that's what this call is, and this is an open meeting for people who are interested in learning more about N3C. We also have a publications committee, a download committee, and we have additional governance committees being considered as we speak, as we go forward to make sure that we accommodate the needs of the community. We also have a deep contracting pool, largely through Palantir and Axle. So Palantir is our cloud infrastructure through Foundry and our software infrastructure. We have 4 contractors that provide really the key leadership around the Palantir work that is conducted. And then we have Axle leads, Nathan Hotaling, who's actually on the call. You can see him, he can wave. And then Luca, who is new to the team, and he'll be talking later today, and Kristen and Amit. And while I'm on this though, I'm going to come back to you, Luca, because I want to say that we have a few other folks on this team who think about education, and that's Aubrey. Think about the sort of Orbit software, that's Brittany, and then Breezy is our sort of project management overall. And we have 3 people total at our Axle contractors who oversee the raw data storage space. And they're there really to oversee that for the security infrastructure, the ATO. They actually don't have access to any raw data files. And so our viewpoints into the raw data files are really, they don't have any access to that. We do have 5 data engineering people at the moment, led by Kristen, for the automated pipelines, and holding sort of the N3C office hours. And if you haven't taken advantage of the N3C office hours, I would encourage you to do them and come meet the team. That's on our N3C website that you can find out the office hours and how to set up a meeting with them. So now I want to come back to Luca, because Luca is our newest member of the ACL team, and I want to give him an opportunity to introduce himself. Luca, you went away. Will you come back?
Yes, I'm
There you
here.
are.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Joni. It's very nice to meet you all. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Luca Calzoni. I'm the new real-world data program lead at Axel Informatics in support of N3C, and I'm grateful for the chance to be here today. Before I say anything else, I want to acknowledge something. N3C exists because of this community, and every data set contributed, every harmonized phenotype, or every published study, that's your work. And so I'm joining a program that has been built by you, and my job is to support that work. And Joni, is now a good time to say something about me? Okay, perfect. I wasn't looking at the slide on screen. And I'm a bit about me. I'm a physician and a research informaticist with a background in public health and participatory research design. So for 15 years, I worked at the intersection of clinical innovation, real-world data, and research infrastructure, including at NIH. And for 4 years, I co-led the development of the SHARE platform at NIH and MHD. It's a cloud-based AI infrastructure for health disparities in AI bias research that grew to support more than 2,500 researchers. And the lesson that I'm bringing here is simple. Platforms succeed when communities feel ownership. So when researchers shape the roadmap, adoption follows, in my experience. So what I commit to is showing up, listening carefully, and earning your trust through what we deliver together. So thank you so much, and I look forward to working with each of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luca. I really appreciate that. Luca will be such a big component of the N3C community and the teams that are leading what we're doing next. And so I'm really delighted that he's joined our team. And so with that, I think I'm going to go next to the engagement and governance discussion. And so I think Mike Kurilla is going to start, and then Rebecca will chime in as well. So Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Joni. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. All right, so just to restate, I think most people are familiar with this. The challenge and the opportunity that we see with N3C is that obviously no single institution has enough data. We have the capability, we have the technology to talk about really large data sets, and N3C is really the reducing to practice that concept. And we're talking about being able to really study rigorously complex diseases, rare conditions, which are very hard to find, really to have a better insight into health disparities. And I think importantly, and we're seeing this move forward, evidence for regulatory processes. Clearly, there's a lot of interest on the part of both the pharmaceutical industry and the FDA in terms of using real-world data to support real-world evidence for regulatory approval of therapeutic indications. And while that's going to proceed forward, I really want the CTSA and the academic communities to really play a role in developing how we do that going forward. Because I think in the past, we've tended to relegate a lot of this to the pharmaceutical industry by itself in conjunction with the FDA, and we just have to play along. So all of these things require longitudinal data across millions of patients, and no single system simply can scale to this level. So we see N3C as the answer. NIH in general sees this as the answer. It's really one of one. There is no other NIH platform that's combining the clinical depth with the research access that we have. In addition, we think that there's a very significant time element here in that the ability to bring up a project within the N3C enclave on the order of a month or so versus what trying to do this, assembling this from the ground up can take 12 months to greater than a year to do this through the sort of longstanding traditional data partnerships. And finally, the N3C is provided to the research community at no cost to approved researchers, unlike other commercial health data vendors that you may have the ability to access. So I think I'm gonna turn this over to Rebecca at this point. We'll go on to the next slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So towards this goal of a community built with trust and governance and communication, I'll now talk a little bit about our engagement goals for N3C. We want this to be a platform that is useful, that researchers value and can use to generate these important insights. And then we want that value to be known across the community. We want to be able to demonstrate and share with the community the capabilities, efficiencies, and research outcomes enabled by the platform. And all of this should come together to build a sustainable community of researchers with all of you joining us today as key partners. So next slide, please. Joni mentioned that one of the first steps that we've taken toward this goal is building the Strategic Partners Committee, which launched in March. So we've only had one meeting, but we look forward to working with this group to really guide N3C as it takes on all kinds of clinical data beyond COVID and addresses a broad range of health and disease domains. So next slide, please. Some of the activities that we have planned for the group include facilitating partnerships by connecting us and N3C leadership and NCATS and NIH and Susan with potential data contributors and collaborators, being able to listen, being able to receive feedback and insights from all of you in the broader community and in data contributing and user communities. Helping us understand researcher needs and the usability of the platform. Really importantly, helping in this broad universe of all different types of data, identify scientific priorities and emerging opportunities, and helping to align N3C with organizational goals so that we can continue to evolve to be as useful as possible for our community. So next slide, please. Here are some of the partner organizations represented in the Strategic Partner Committee. You'll recognize some groups that are very experienced with N3C as contributors and users, and that's by design. But we do hope to find ways to engage with all of you. Next slide, please. Through some of the potential areas of focus that the group will take on. Including strategies for buy-in and as groups start to contribute data, how is it happening? How are they controlling the data? How are they making it work at an institutional level? But also from a user perspective, how can they train and educate new users so that the data can be most valuable? And then very importantly, if it hasn't come across clearly already, working to build trust and transparency through our communications, addressing community concerns, and building positive feedback loops for communication and trust building. So I think I will stop there and turn it over to, we have Luca, and we'll now also add Nathan Hotaling, will give us a perspective of how we're building trust, transparency, and research value through the governance and operations of the platform.
Awesome. Thanks, Rebecca. So next slide. We have talked a bit about what code-governed data in N3C looks like, but I think it's good to kind of review and also update or highlight a few changes since we've last discussed this. So in general, you have contributing institutions, and they are now contributing their data to a space that we call the N3C DI&H space. And I'll go into a bit more detail after this slide about what that entails and why it is different. But the idea here is that it is an isolated space where records will go that is not the trusted research environment where kind of analysis and gold standard data sets live. And instead, it's kind of an isolated space with very limited access in a kind of trusted N3C and NCATS controlled cloud infrastructure that allows us to process and link data sets in a way that is both scalable and more transparent for the community, while also being able to provide kind of additional controls for the community and their data. That DI&H space will then have data that can be provisioned in to different dynamic workspaces that are going to live inside of the trusted research environment, or TRE. Those will be provisioned based off of approved data access requests. So there, folks will define their phenotype. So before in COVID, the COVID phenotype was already specified. We were pulling data from institutions that had tested, or patients that had tested for COVID. And in the new system, a phenotype will be defined by the data access requester to make sense for their given research question. If the data requester chooses to, they can get some feedback from the community in a DAR feedback committee. And ultimately, then the data access request goes out to institutions who have elected to review individual data access requests. Those institutions are allowed to opt out of that particular request. So if that data access request doesn't meet their institutional needs or whatever their justification is, they can opt out, and then the data is sent, or the entire package is sent to the data access committee for review. And I will talk a bit more about the steps that the data access committee goes for in reviewing a data access request, but it's not a scientific review. It is more centered towards making sure that for instance, things like that would violate your data use agreements or your data transfer agreements are not a part of the data access request, that in fact the phenotype matches your study design, et cetera, so that everyone is doing the things that they are saying they are supposed to be inside of the trusted research environment. And once that approval happens, the data from the DI&H space is provisioned into the dynamic workspace, and users can go there and apply their templates and do the analysis that they need. Next slide. So just a few noted things about the trusted research environment. In the old N3C platform, this is where researchers analyzed data and where raw data was ingested, harmonized, and standardized. So those were all the same thing. So the trusted research environment was also the DI&H space. But upon getting a lot of feedback from the community, we have heard your concerns and are kind of isolating this data ingestion and harmonization space from the trusted researcher environment, which will remain Palantir Foundry. So no raw data will be in Foundry, only kind of gold standard processed, limited, and de-identified data sets will live there. The DI&H space is going to be set up. It is not happening today, so there is no current data ingestion happening today. And so in the DI&H space, it is mostly just a place where we are prototyping, where pipelines can run with synthetic data, so not using any sites data. And we are testing out multiple platforms right now. So there's a high-performance compute cluster at NCATS, there's Databricks environment, Snowflake, there's Cloud Native. And we are all we are assessing all of those platforms right now for the DI&H space. And since we have ingested no data from sites and are processing no data from sites, this is not set up today. But we hope after kind of this benchmarking and assessment is done, we will be able to identify a DI&H space. And then the same governance controls, so next slide, as have been available all other iterations of N3C are going to be available. So in order to get access to that space, you must have an operational data access request, or DAR. Those operational DARs are going to have additional controls, which I'll talk a little bit more on a following slide. But here again, the slide from, I guess, slide 19, so 2 slides ago, was more focused on the workflow from like a data contributor's point of view, and here is a workflow from a researcher's point of view. So you would submit your data access request. You can opt into this DAR feedback, committee feedback. It will go out for institutional review and opt out for institutions that have chosen that form of data sharing. Then the committee, the data access committee, will review the data access request. Assuming it meets those checks, it will go to the phenotype requested by the data access request will be assembled and then provisioned into a dynamic workspace. That dynamic workspace is then within the trusted research environment where users can do all of the things that they have classically wanted to do in N3C. There are still the publication export controls, and newly added, we have lifecycle management. So apologies, it says DARS, so data use request. That is the old acronym. It should say DARS there. But for number 9, DARs are time limited now. So every year you have to renew your data access request, and you can renew it up to a maximum of 2 times. So a 3-year total lifespan for each data access request, at which time, if you still need more time than 3 years, you would resubmit your data access request to the data access committee and get it reapproved. And then it would get another 3-year approval cycle. Next slide. Other things that are important to note here are that N3C data cannot be accessed without an approved DAR. So there's no way, there's no backdoor, there's no like HHS pipeline that allows you to get access to the data. All users, federal and non-federal alike, must adhere to the access procedures, which is what everyone is agreeing to in their data use agreements. Anybody who wants to get access has to meet all policy requirements. So they have to complete the trainings, they have to get IRB approvals, they have to get the necessary institutional attestations and personal attestations. If they want access to level 3 data, it must go through review by the DAC, and they must have a justification for needing that level of data, just like they have done always in N3C. Row level data will not leave the enclave, so there is still a data download committee. There is no way to export individual row level data, and even summary tables that have counts that are below 20 will be rejected. And then also they still have to have their research request approved by the NIH DAC. Next slide. In terms of assurances, the data is protected by the same certificates of confidentiality as before. So it is the same type of agreement that you all have trusted in the past. And then, the access to the data is still going to be governed by your data transfer agreements, data use agreements, and linkage honest broker agreements that are all protecting your data and all require kind of the above governance that was just discussed. Next slide. And so I did want to talk a little bit about what the Data Access Committee actually does. I know that has been a question in previous meetings. So there's really 6 different kind of categories. So sorry, next slide. 6 different categories of activities that the Data Access Committee goes through when they are reviewing a data access request. So the first is what level of data is the researcher requesting? So is it the de-identified data set? Is it synthetic data? Is it the limited data set? Do they have approval for that? And do they justify the need if they are asking for the limited data set for actual dates of service and 5-digit zip codes, or could they really do the research that they are proposing with just the fully de-identified data set? The second thing they look at is IRB alignment, so making sure that the institution that is applying for it, or the institution of the researcher has an IRB, and they have reviewed the research proposal and deemed it as non-human subjects research. Additionally, that the proposal that the IRB has reviewed is the same proposal as is being submitted, has to be checked. So making sure that the letter from the IRB aligns in terms of the scope and the breadth of the research that the IRB has approved from their institution and what is being proposed for submission to the DAC. They look for prohibited activities. And so here, this is, again, not a scientific review, but things that that would violate your data use agreements or violate the data transfer agreements. So, for instance, if you if you had a data use limitation in your data use agreement that prohibited commercial research and the data use and the DAR is being submitted by a commercial entity, this would be checked for there. There is a DAR phenotype alignment, so that is checked. So making sure that the phenotype that you have submitted is appropriate and not overscoped or I guess underscoped to try to answer the scientific question of interest. So if you're studying cancer patients, maybe you don't need all data that N3C has available to. Perhaps you only need a cancer cohort, et cetera. For the institutional data use limitations, they are further reviewed here. So explicitly, every site that opts to implement site-specific data use limitations, these are reviewed here. So again, that kind of commercial partners is a common one we often cite, but there could be others, and those are individually reviewed and enforced by the DAC. And then finally, you get to a final determination by the DAC where they kind of write up all of the different checks and assessments that they do and return that to sites in a kind of iterative feedback loop so that sites are able to update their submissions and align it to meeting this workflow. Next slide. So things that haven't changed is that next slide, is that we are still asking for the minimum necessary data to be provisioned in order to answer a research question. So this is something that has always been the case in N3C, and you really need to make sure that the phenotypes that you are asking for in your data access requests match what it is you need to answer that question. So not overly broad, not asking for the limited data set when all you need is the de-identified, et cetera. We need to ensure that the enclave controls have remained consistent. So one of the things that will still be true is that these dynamic workspaces will prevent raw data extraction. You cannot get to row level data. Individual browsing is going to be restricted, and all results are reviewed by the data download committee before they are approved. So there is no way that people can start downloading files or mass screenshotting or something like that in order to get the data out. Representation. So now that users can define their own phenotype, we do want to make sure that any phenotype that is imposed does not have demographic exclusions that don't make sense or that would make the data non-representative of the cohort being that would ideally be provisioned in order to study a research question. In large part, all procedures are maintained in terms of operational decisions, code revisions, and phenotype changes. So all of these are going to be strictly versioned and available to the community as they always have. Any kind of issues, you will be able to go back and see the history of what was changed when by whom, and then you can always revert back a change if there is some problem with a new phenotype or something like that. And finally, we're still requiring that results are shared. So approved projects must return results, methods, and code to the community, supporting reproducibility and fair aligned data reuse. Next slide. So a few other kind of improvements and updates next have to do, again, with things that we heard from the community, which is that we are isolating the DI&H space from the trusted research environment. In the DI&H space, we are working on what I would call automation first and zero trust principles so that all standard ingestion, transformation, and harmonization processes run through controlled pipelines, and that human access is strictly limited to authorized operational roles. So for instance, somebody that looks at data quality doesn't necessarily need to be able to see the raw data, only the reports of the data quality checks. Operational DARs only, so access to the DI&H space will require approved operational data access request, DARs. So the users here will be the only ones authorized to perform these kind of platform functions. And there is kind of zero permissions for research or exploration in this space. Nobody is going to be mining this data for anything. It is strictly for operational, like data cleaning purposes, making sure PII is removed, et cetera. And then last, community transparency. So the last thing that we are going to do that I think is new is that any authenticated user will now be able to view approved personnel, their roles, and their affiliated organizations for each operational DAR. So unlike kind of previously in the next iteration, when we have a DI&H space up again and sites are sending data and we are processing data again, the only way that you will be able to get access to that space is via these operational DARs. And on those operational DARs, you will be able to see every person, their institution, and what their role is, so that you will know who exactly it is that has access to your data. And as Joni kind of highlighted before, that team, the folks that are running those pipelines are also the folks that are running our office hours. And so you can meet them, you can talk with them, you can check what it is that they are doing and how they are doing it, provide them input, et cetera. And so what we are hoping is that this added transparency, again, helps to kind of build trust with the community. And with that, I believe that is my last slide.
Thank you, Nathan. All right, so we've got some time for questions. I'm going back through the chat, and yes, the first question that came in at 4:04, which I predicted, was, will the slides be provided afterwards to participants? And yes, they will be. Both the slides and this recording will be made available. Recognize that we can't do it immediately because federal rules require that these undergo what's referred to as 508 compliance review. And so once that is done, we hope to have them posted as quickly as possible. There's a question about, can you tell us some more about data counts? What is it, located where, and what's its role in this project? Joni, you want to?
Yeah, I'll take that.
You want to address it?
Actually, I'll address it, but Susan had to drop off
Right.
To go to another meeting. And I think what I'd like to do is actually just have her come back and talk a little about that a little bit more in depth to give you a better sense. But in a way, there are essentially two processes by which you can send data to N3C right now. One is through our direct data transfer agreement that we have with institutions that we've had before, that we will continue to have. And another one is that some institutions have a data transfer agreement with what the data counts program. And so essentially it is a process by which the institutions would have software on within their sites that would be able to automatically transit data to the data counts location, where there would be, sort of the de-identification processes, the consenting processes, if there are some, doing data quality checks, and then they would manage all of the release to, for example, an end enclave, which N3C would be one of those end enclaves for the EHR data. So it would be a process by which it would be a bit more of an automated transfer of data from institutions to N3C, while undergoing the harmonization processes outside of N3C. So it's a very robust pipeline. It's not in many institutions at the moment, and so it's that is a sort of a future state that we hope to get to. And so essentially, we've built our data transfer agreements to be in alignment, so that we can continue to do the data transfers as we have always done. But if the institutions are interested in this approach, we can also accommodate that activity because of the sort of the streamlined nature with which it's pulled, and it sort of creates more of a federated opportunity for data to be transferred to N3C on occasions for the research to happen. And again, I think it would be really great if Susan can come back and talk a little bit more about data counts in and of itself, and also data counts in its relationship to N3C and the real world data platform. So we'll put that on a future meeting agenda.
Good. Okay, thanks. All right, the next question, and Nathan, you may have addressed this. Can you provide information on how legacy data from the old N3C model will be handled?
Yeah, so for right now, it is still available for research. And so we have no new data transfers from sites for new data. And so the only data that is made available is the released data sets from the former N3C. And that will remain available for the foreseeable future until we get sites contributing new data. But what we hope and believe is that as those research projects conclude and new data is available, this new data set will hopefully be richer. You'll be able to set your own controls, et cetera. That over time there will be less and less use of the original COVID data set. And so what will happen is basically after the last researcher active DUA using that data has ended, we are going to retain the data for the records retention policy that the government requires and for research transparency, and then the data would be deleted. And so, that is the current kind of hope for the community, is that we move to this new access model, and that we are able to sunset this data set and move it out of circulation.
Okay, and then again, you may have addressed this. Can you speak to what measures have been taken to ensure the data are accessible and easy for users to work with?
Yep. So data is going to be made available in the exact same formats and kind of schemas that it was before. So that is primarily OMOP. So we still intend to provide all OMOP data all EHR data in OMOP format, along with relevant linked data sets like mortality and OMOP format. I do think for some of the geospatial data and things like that some projects will require the OMOP data model is not going to be sufficient, and so there we are going to adhere to community standards as best as we physically can, so that it's not some custom bespoke format or schema that anyone has to do. It's what they have hopefully been using in the community. And if you ever run into a data set that is in a format that is provided by us that isn't useful, or you would prefer it in another one, we love that feedback. Our team is always looking for ways to help improve the usability of our data.
Okay, and then when can we expect new users to be able to join the platform? We have a project, but analysts were not able to create accounts. Do you think that's from an institute? Is it possible they're asking from an institution that did not have a pre-existing DUA?
So that perhaps is the case. We have not allowed users who previously did not have an account in N3C to access the data set. That is coming online at the end of this month. And so we expect that let's call it definitely by May 7th, but hopefully by May 1st, we will be able to allow new users to register for N3C who did not previously have an account.
Okay. And then there's a question which is the next one is, how does one join the team? I'm not sure which team they are necessarily referring to. I don't know. Okay, maybe they'll clarify later on. Let's move on. The data can only be analyzed on the NCATS platform. Question. And if so, any cost? There is no cost associated with this, and the answer is they can only be analyzed on the NCATS platform. That's just the way it is. And who can we contact about a DUR that we haven't been notified about for greater than a month?
So there's a support. So N3C support at ncats.nih.gov is who you should be able to email for any of those problems. You can also show up at office hours. I believe they are at least once a week, but maybe twice a week. And our team can help you there if you would rather have something more hands-on.
All right. Someone, this is a little, I was part of a program previously. And built a pipeline in the NCATS environment. The program has ended. How do I continue to work on the pipeline without being part of the project that's ended? Do you understand what they're asking?
I would suggest that you come to office hours to dig into that with our team.
Okay.
It is likely, so none of that is lost. Your data pipelines are still available. And you working with the team on those calls, you should be able to reconstitute that and continue working on it. So I would encourage you to join the office hours there to help dig into that.
Okay. I think this is an important question to clarify coming up. Is each project-specific data set in the TRE generated directly from the DI and H space, or does a hospital's entire data first get converted into limited data set that is stored in the TRE with project-specific data sets derived from that?
Yeah, so limited data sets will be sent from hospitals to the DI&H space. From there, it will go through cleaning and making sure that any accidental PII was removed, et cetera. And then let's say, at the end of all of those pipelines, there's let's call it a gold data set, so a gold standard data set. That is then going to have your DAR specific phenotypes provision out a subset of it. And that is what is made available in the trusted research environment. So not all data in the Palantir environment.
Yeah, only the data relevant for the subset of data relevant to address the DAR specific question will be provisioned into the TRE. Okay, next question. How are individuals selected for the committees? Are the individuals on each committee listed on the website? If not, can this be reconsidered as a transparency measure? So.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're just not there yet. Just not there yet. But that can happen.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah. That was great.
All right. Regarding the DTAs, who will be the new Reliance IRB? We received notification from Hopkins that they are no longer the central IRB for this work. The required language still points to JHU. What can we say about that, Nathan, at this point?
Yeah, so it is going to be Advara. So we have gone with a commercial IRB for the data transfer. And we have, I believe, gone through the full transition exercise with Johns Hopkins. There might be a couple outstanding items there, but we intend to have the Reliance IRB led by Advara.
Yeah, and just to the reason this is where it is right now is because we require our final DUA as part of that transfer IRB protocol, and because N3C, along with 43 other databases across NIH, are regarded as a CADR, we've had to have a new DUA that addresses all the CADR requirements. So we're waiting on the final disposition of that DUA so that we can finalize everything with Advara at this point. Okay, does the N3C Enclave provide GPU access for analyses?
We do. The more nuanced answer there is that because this comes at no cost to the community, the number of GPU instances that are allowed to be spun up at any runtime is limited. So we don't allow unlimited users to use unlimited amounts of GPU. And so if you make those requests, it comes in by project basis, and we approve users as one group is finished using the GPUs, we will provision them for another.
Okay. All right. What is the retention period?
So, and I kind of touched on this earlier, we basically, for research and reproducibility, we are going to keep the data active or retained until all data access requests that are using that data are complete. And then we retain the data for Records Retention Act policy. So I think that is 7 years, but I would need to check what the Record Retention Act is. But we retain it for what we are legally required to, and then we will delete the data.
Okay. Did I hear correctly? The new requested data set from participating sites would be all data on all patients.
So that is not quite accurate. So we are asking for a disease agnostic phenotype. And so what that will eliminate and remove is a lot of the patients who show up at a site for one-off care. They break a leg when they're traveling, or they only go to that hospital one time and then they never return. So it eliminates all of those types of patients. And so we define that as a disease agnostic phenotype. And what we found in working with several of the pilot sites during both the cancer and renal pilots is that eliminates a significant portion. So something like 40% of the patient population that is available within a hospital system is these kind of not folks that are not consistent users of that healthcare system, and therefore that we do not request those data.
Okay. What are the plans for data quality checks at the time of data transfer?
I feel like I'm answering like all of these questions. A lot of very, very technical questions here.
You're doing a great job.
Thanks. So for now,
I feel like I'm asking all the questions.
Yeah. So data quality will be assessed at the minimum with the same kind of scorecards and metrics that they were assessed for previously. So those are things for like missingness, typing of variables, et cetera. What we are hoping to do in the DI&H space is have even more robust quality checks for the data so that sites can receive even more detailed and kind of, let's call it informative feedback and scorecards. We are going for much more automated feedback. And also when I say automated, I mean like informative, as in here's the thing, like here is what the structural problem is. We found that in the old pipelines, often the reporting of what was wrong or why it was wrong was often a labyrinthine. Like you had to kind of do a lot of tracebacks, and it took a lot of time and energy. And so in the new DI&H space, we are going for more and more kind of transparency over how a given quality check works and how it's failed, and able to provide that to sites more promptly than we used to, hopefully reducing the burden for both sites and our data ingestion team.
Okay. We're coming up at the top of the hour here. Will the domain teams that were community organized still be relevant in this new N3C?
Go ahead, Joni.
Oh, I was that was a good question. I think that I would love to see the community organize around domain teams still, and I think that's something that we can accommodate again. But Nathan, is that a reasonable thing to say to you?
Yeah, I think all of those and more is what we're hoping. So I think all of those domain teams are going to be necessary, but as we get into other therapeutic areas, we're going to need more experts, more domains, and more input from more folks. And so we're hoping to engage the community more as a function of time.
And I imagine that, those will be more opportunities to discuss as we continue to move forward here. So stay tuned. I think we're getting off the runway here, and I hope that these questions and answers are really helpful to make sure that everybody's aligned with what we're doing. So I appreciate all of the questions.
Okay, we're at the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful of people's time, so I think we'll call it there. And thank you for participation.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
Okay. Take care.